meeting to order. City of University Heights City Council meeting. Today is July 8th, 2025. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. We appreciate it. First order of business is the council, and all 5 council are present tonight. And then approval of minutes, June 10th, 2025. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes that were circulated? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. And so we're holding a public hearing tonight. I call the public hearing to order to consider proposed changes to the zoning ordinance. If anybody's here tonight to talk about that specific subject, you can step up to the podium and give your name and address. This is about the zoning ordinance changes proposed. Is anyone on
No.
Zoom?
No one's on Zoom.
Did you get any comments?
I did not.
Okay, so I closed the public hearing and then we reopened the regular meeting. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to consider ordinance number 257, amending the zoning ordinance for permit paving and parking in rear yards at particular addresses to accommodate requested access changes needed for the Melrose Avenue Complete Streets project. Steve, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. So we've talked about this various times in various ways. Most of what I'm going to say tonight is kind of a repeat of last month, but as part of the Melrose Complete Streets project and consistent with city planning and discussions that go back roughly 9 years, access to Melrose Avenue, particularly at the intersection of Kozer and Gulfview, so driveways onto Melrose, to the extent possible, it would be nice to eliminate them. It makes it a hardship for the properties because, you know, they need access. The way the city has developed and grown, the way the traffic on Melrose has grown over the years, and our city engineer isn't here tonight. He could speak with more authority from a traffic standpoint, but I just don't think there's any way that good planning would allow driveways to be placed at particular locations. The ones across from Stella that we're talking about here, 1007 Melrose Avenue, 1009 Melrose Avenue. So as the city, through city engineer, staff, council members, and the mayor have talked at various times over the years about this Melrose Complete Streets project, one goal has been to talk with the property owners of those properties to see if there might be circumstances by which they would agree to give up that access onto Melrose. It improves traffic flow, it improves safety, it improves pedestrian access. If we do some things with landscaping, which will come down the road, I think it'll improve aesthetic, but I think it'll also just improve the entranceway to the city. It'll make it possible for some intersection improvements, all of which are identified in the city's comprehensive plan, which was updated in 2020. And so, as I said, this has been a multi-year process and a multi-faceted effort that has involved, I don't know how many, but quite a few discussions directly with the property owners. And what has evolved has been the framework, I guess, of a plan that would eliminate those driveway access points onto Melrose Avenue for those properties, and extend and in exchange permit some parking in the rear yards of those properties. And yeah, and one of those properties, so right there, 1007 Melrose Avenue. And I don't know the history of this. I tried to look into it a little bit, but I really couldn't find a lot. But 1007 Melrose Avenue is outlined in kind of the aquamarine outline there. It already has that, you know, it's somebody called it a flagpole type lot. It already has access and ownership, you know, onto Olive Court. And so that's huge, because if you were going to allow parking in a rear yard, well, how are they going to get to the rear yard? Well, it's super easy for 1007. The 1007 goes all the way to Olive Court. And in fact, there's already an access there that's used. So part of the idea would be to create an easement, so a right for people who have ownership of or live at 1009 to use that access and then have a parking area behind 1009. The city zoning ordinance restricts parking in rear yards and other yards, but parking in rear yards, it restricts pavement in rear yards. It establishes certain setbacks. It establishes restrictions on the size of paving. And it establishes restrictions on the use of paving. So for example, the zoning ordinance says at different points, well, you can have a patio or you can have a concrete slab and, you know, as long as it's no bigger than this and as long as it's, you know, this many feet away from this property line and so forth, but you can't park on it except on game days. So that's a general description of some of the lay of the land. And as I've said, in addition to giving up, well, as I've said, part of the evolution of the discussion through the city engineer mostly with these property owners has been, would you be willing under some circumstances to give up those access points? And the answer is, yeah, let's talk. And so there are a number of features. We're talking about varying utility, you know, the electricity and so forth, widening the sidewalk. But the main feature would be giving up those access points. And then the question is, well, then where do we park? And so what this ordinance does is it says that for these two particular properties, because of the long history of the city's planning, the community visioning that happened in 2016, I think it was.
Yes.
Followed by updates to the comprehensive plan in 2020, geared toward the Melrose Avenue Complete Streets project, which is really underway now in terms of planning and will be underway in terms of construction next year, 2026. Given that we're coming to that point, we need to make it so the city has the right to permit these properties to have the kind of parking that will be required in their rear yards, since they won't have access in the front yards. And I didn't speak to this, but 1009, you know, it has parking pad in the front yard, so that's going to go away. And so to accommodate, or I guess to make possible that request that the city has made of these property owners, would you give up these access points? Would you agree to varying utilities, widening the sidewalk? There's also some, what we call a public taking. They're going to actually give up some of their property as a part of this Melrose Avenue project. You know, we need to focus then on, well, where's the parking going to be and how big is it going to be and so forth. Step one of that, where's the parking going to be, how big is it going to be and so forth, is the zoning ordinance needs to accommodate to give the council some flexibility to have a discussion with the property owners going forward to say, okay, you know, what's reasonable for the number of parking spots that are needed or required, what's reasonable for the location of those parking spots. That's, those discussions will be forthcoming. The start of it is to give the city council, to give the city the authority to have that discussion, to be able to say, okay, we're going to allow you to have this many parking spots if you put them here, is to change the zoning ordinance to allow that flexibility. You know, the city has to abide in most ways by the zoning ordinance, just like anybody else. The city actually doesn't have to abide by the zoning ordinance with regard to city property, but that's not what we're talking about. But the city can't just say to a private property owner, hey, look, we'd like you to do something for us. We're willing to do something for you, and we'll just ignore our zoning ordinance. You know, the council can't do that. What the council can do is say, okay, we think in you know, particular circumstances, I've been the city attorney going on 35 years. We've never done this before. One thing was sort of close, but not really. But where we have a special situation where we really want to close these access points off, we really want to reconfigure some things here. But these properties obviously have to have parking. It makes sense legally. The policy is the council's decision, not mine. But from a legal standpoint, there's a justification for the council if it wants to say, okay, we're going to treat these properties differently. And how exactly that difference is going to be is yet to come in terms of these further discussions that will happen in the coming months. But what's before you tonight in terms of this ordinance number 57 just gives the council the flexibility really to have those discussions, consultation with the city engineer, other city staff, obviously discussions with the property owner about how exactly we're going to do this. But step one is to give the council the authority to sort of have the discussion. That's what ordinance 257 does.
Any questions by council? Okay, first consideration of ordinance 257 is before you. Can I have a motion to begin with?
So moved.
Motion by Nick. Is there a second? Second by Lisa. Discussion. Okay, ready for a roll call vote?
Gone.
Aye.
Herbold. Aye. Moore.
Aye.
Schroeder. Aye. Swales. Aye. First consideration carries 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go back here to comments from the public. I'm hoping some of you want to speak tonight to the council, and you can speak, you can come up and you have 5 minutes to speak. You give your name and your address, and we welcome comments. Okay, Chris is going to start.
My name is Chris Luzzy. Oh.
Well, we're going to have to move that.
I'm gonna be over here, otherwise I'll
Yeah,
be hopeless. 338 Poser, and I wanted to talk about the trails, so I don't know if this is the right time.
yes, this is the perfect
do
time.
it. I really love the idea of the trails in our land and talking about the University of Iowa. So I think it's great. I've walked it, at least our part of it. And I think it's a really nice addition to our community. You know, we talk about being a walkable, bikeable community and this kind of walking stuff. I mean, I've taken some of my family on it. It's great. Anyhow, let me just say that. The other thing I just wanted to add is that the University Heights Community Fund received money in memory of Linda Fincham, who was one of our trustees for many years. And we, our intent is to dedicate that to some sort of enhancement of the trails, whether it be benches, whether it be picnic bench or table, I don't know what, that would be in consideration and with whatever becomes of this. So there'd be some additional money available, you know, maybe to mention it to other grantors that there are other entities willing to put money forward for this project. I hope you will consider it, and, you know, I understand it may need to be in bites. You know, anything this big will have to be in bites. You know, you start here, maybe second, whatever. So, I think it would be a great thing. I just want to encourage you to support it and continue to move it along, because I think it would be great for our community. We did buy this land for a reason, you know, other than to just kind of let it sit there. People are using it already. We should just make it a little better.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Would anyone else like to speak? You would? Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'm Scott Borghammer, and we live at 1 OUP over here, and I am the president of the board there. Nick has been great as far as getting us information about potential trails and different things. We've got that out. I would say there's a support for it. We already have people that use the trail daily, and we do have people that certainly would benefit from that. I think our concern that I've heard from our tenants is that parking, you know, where would they park? What would they do with that? And then just the overall, you know, more information about where it would go, how far it would be, and those kind of things. And Nick's done a good job for that. So we've got people that are supporting a great deal, but they do have concern about, we already have, you know, businesses here, and there's concern about parking and how much they would use. So I think we have several people here tonight from our building. And I think that's probably the major concern I've heard is where we're gonna park and what we're gonna do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Would anyone else like to speak? Casey?
First of all, I want to thank the council for considering this. There's been a tremendous amount of planning that's gone into this. And my concern was access. I'm not very good on rough ground myself, and I think that I see a lot of people with little kids on bikes and strollers and wheelchairs and walkers, and I'm particularly impressed that you've got a part of the trail that's been is gonna be paved. So that I'm looking forward to interacting with both the land that we purchased, what, 7 years ago or so, and the university. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Oh,
Hi, I'm Katie Purble, 1250 Melrose, and I would like to thank all of you for working on several projects that are moving forward and considering things. I am also very excited about the trail. I also own Sidekick Copy and Books down the way, and I think this will be great for the businesses. I share concerns about parking, but I do think that businesses will end up getting some traffic from something this amazing to enhance our community. I am also in favor of having it paved, having a brother who was, had short-term disability before he passed. We had an incident where we could not get access for him to someone who were on vacation. And giving a person that dignity to get out there with everybody else and enjoy that space, I think is really important, and I understand that it's a big part of the grant. So I think that's part of where the funding would come from. The other thing that I would like to talk about are the street lamps, the street lights that are potentially going in as part of the streetscape project. I really, really hope that you consider public input on those. I think taste is, everyone has a little bit different style, but I want you to consider the overall character of our town and how long we've been here. And I would really like to be able to come over and look at some designs as a community member. And just put a tally, find one that I like, so you have that going forward. Ultimately, I recognize that will be council's decision and I may not get my way, but at least I can have some input and have some thoughts with that design, and that can be open to the community. Thank you.
thank you, Katie. Who would like?
Just really briefly, just to kind of add on to what Katie was saying, there are people in the community that have design backgrounds, and we just wanted to make sure there's cohesiveness in the signage, but it looks like you've already come up with a new logo that has the bright green that we had been discussing as maybe a signature color, kind of consciously or unconsciously signifying the public spaces of University Heights. Kind of like Portable has blue and red. You think of those as their colors, we could just keep those kind of design items in mind moving forward with signage for the trail, or perhaps freshening up the play space over here, trying to keep that cohesive so people can see that we're a unified city.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Hi. I haven't
Hi.
seen you in a while.
That's been a little while. Michael Crocker, 1490 Grand Avenue. Just a couple of comments about proposed trails. I think expanding the trails is a great idea. I spend a lot of time in the woods back there anyway, as it is, and have used the trails extensively. A couple of concerns obviously would be parking, and where that's going to be placed. I was also going to bring up, I've mentioned this, I think, to your city council, it's been a while. The current access points at the end of Sunset and at the end of Prospect Place, both of those during periods of rain or the springtime get inundated with road silt and water. There's going to be ice. If it's possible to look at doing some improved storm drainage there, that would improve access at those points, safety as well as just being cleaner. And I understand the desire to pave a portion of the trails. My personal opinion for its work is that there's lots of concrete in the world already, so let's not go very deep into the forested area. Keep it as natural as we can. Anyway, thank you guys for looking at it.
And Michael, you've also brought up to me, people doing turnarounds in your driveway.
Oh,
Now,
yes.
did you share that just since we're,
Yeah, since I'm talking.
since you're talking?
Okay, slightly different subject. So since the opening of OUP, we have consistently had 3-point turners at our house, and so have our neighbors, the Carsons, the Shrivers. They either come and do 3-point turns like in the driveway, or they'll turn on the Sunset and back out, and come around again. Or it can be, oh man, sometimes it's 10 or 20 a day that we'll see there, so it's an unintended consequence. I believe what is happening, because I've done this myself, when you use Google Maps or Waze or whatever it may be to try and find the businesses here, and you're traveling east on Melrose, it does not tell you to turn into one university for whatever this is, University Way.
University.
It doesn't tell you to turn there. You go, you drive, and then when you get parallel with
Oh,
Maggie's, it says your destination's on the left. And you've already passed the driveway to turn in. So everybody then turns left at this light, goes down and does the 3-point turn dance in front of our house. Like this one. Yeah, that's been a bother for a while, so I'm not sure. We've tried to tell Google they're not giving the right information. That hasn't worked. Yeah, I don't know what the solution bar would be for that, but something we should look at. And I mean, do the addresses have to be on Melrose? Like, so does it have to be 1305 Melrose, or can it be 1305.5 University Way, and maybe Google gets smarter about what it's supposed to be? And how we get someone to turn it into this facility, I don't know, but it's, yeah. Thank you for reminding me about that one. That's it.
thank you. Who else would like to speak? Come on up. Hi there.
So,
Could you give your name and address?
Rick Hobson, and I live just right down the.
Thank you, Rick.
205 off here. For a bigger month on it, and, I wanted to just briefly brush on the road straightening project. That talk about the trail a little bit more, but, you know, one, I think uniform theme to both projects is to try to maintain in the face of a lot of adversity, and most of it is money and developments and just the demographics of the city. The livability of our little village here, you know, a place to live and to own property and to raise families and have it be a place not just to visit, but to, you know, live, right? And the thing about living in a place is have it be livable, which is have it have amenities, but not be, you know, a conduit or a tube to someplace else that is, you know, taken over by people that don't consider this home. You know, we consider this home. But there's a lot of pressure to turn it into a place on the way, you know, from where homes, where people live to where people need to go and have like the village, you know, which I've lived in for 30 years. Just not be a place to, you know, raise families and live. So maintaining livability is, you know, critical to that. Which speaks to these two projects, you know, the road straightening thing makes perfect sense. From just a, you know, you look at that intersection, it's a mess, right? Who can get anywhere, but. You know, I just want to keep in mind, and I'm not opposing it officially, I'm just raising the line that. Whenever you know, remove barbecues, straighten streets. To try to improve traffic flow. You know, it changes the character of the town. From a place to grow, to raise families, to a place to get through in a hurry and efficiently. From where real families live. To where people have to get to, which is the hospital, so it's at the basics of the hospital. And, you know, the pressure on Melrose. The bridge, the whole conduit has been insanely high for the past 30 years. I've lived through it, so have you. And, you know, there was pressure and the bridge was remodeled to make it 4 lanes. And University Heights fought it off, knowing that there's a requirement that if you have a 4-lane bridge at the end of a 2-lane road, that you could mandate the road be widened, which would basically turn the entire Melrose from Sunset to Gulfview into row houses. It, I just think we need to be sensitive to the nature of the town, the people that have chosen to live here and raise families. And when it's one of these death by 1,000 cuts things. And the road straightening thing is one of those little cuts. It does improve throughput. We do have businesses here now. We've got football pressure and all this other stuff. But when you make it easier to get through a place, it changes the character of the town a little bit. It changes the, the livability of our place that we have all chosen to live in. So that is my issue. Everything about it makes total sense unless you have decided to live in University Heights, make a home here, raise a family, and are worried about, straightening roads and widening roads for some sort of commercial reason. None of this helps raising children or, anything but just getting through things. So that's that. I'm not opposed to it. I just have these long-term concerns that won't be played out until I am here. But somebody is going to record this, thank goodness it's me, and say, hey, somebody mentioned that we were debasing the town back in 2025 to make things easier to get through and look at that. But moving on to the trails. Nick. And he has contacted Josh Shonda that has developed this team that has just this outstanding plan to improve the livability of University Heights. It's an amazing, we have this property that we bought kind of in defense of the university and development, which is an amazing gift. It's totally beautiful back there. If nothing were done, it's an amazing hiking trail just to walk through and have fun. It's developable, but with some difficulty, but it would be a destruction of the beauty of the property. To turn it into a multi-use trail for hikers, and biking and walking and all this stuff is just such an opportunity. And Nick has just seized this and has developed this team that's put this project together. I know there are issues anytime there's a change. There are concerns about the consequences of change. One of which is parking. I think this trail, unlike other, trails, perfect example would be the Sugar Bottom bike trails out there. Basically, unless you're a beast, you can't get there without riding. These trails are they're almost always going to be used by, it's not a destination trail. It's not that long. It's going to be used by people who live in this city and live here. It is a gift to ourselves that to enhance livability of University Heights. Parking is an issue, but it's not going to be like another recreational facility. Number two is Nick has worked to create a bunch of access points with little puddles of parking that don't interfere with the people that live here, are designed to be non-impactful for the citizens here. It is, I think when completed, will be an amazing addition to the livability, which is what I think I'm concerned about, because I live here. I live here but it'll also be connected to kind of some daisy chain trail systems in Coralville, in North Liberty, and Iowa City, and on University of Iowa Lane that make for, in aggregate, make for a little bit of a trail system that will draw people to the community. It just is will make us part of a little, chain of pearls that exists in Johnson County as a rideable, livable, enjoyable community to visit. Nick has partnered with Think Iowa City. Josh Schomburger is on this. So there are grants ready to be submitted that hinge critically on our this project. There's also a naming opportunity. If the Fincham Trust has money, this could be named, there's a, I would, raise my hand right now to name it the Fincham. Point being that it's just a great project and in large measure, thanks to Nick's leadership on this. So with that, that's all I have to say. And,
Thank you.
I'll go.
Kate Middleton, 136 Gulfview Avenue. I just really quickly wanted to kind of reiterate what Mr. Hobson said and say I think it would be a great asset to our community. My neighbors across the street, Dennis and Mike, also agree. My neighbors down the street, Pamela and Chris Ahern couldn't be here, wanted to be, but also agree. I think a lot of us with young and older kids would just love to have somewhere to hike around and bike around, and I think it's a great idea. I also wanted to say, what Katie Herbold said about having a vote on the streetlights, I think is a great idea. I think that's a great opportunity for neighbors that don't normally come to city council meetings or aren't able to be involved and give their input and feel like they had some say in the matter.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak tonight? I know somebody else wants to speak. Rita? No. Okay,
I'm just trying to be comfortable back with you, and I just, I'm in agreement with a lot of the opinions on the trail, particularly accessible. In my stroller days, that also applies to parents with strollers, and that would have been a really great thing to have in those days. We're past that now, but, that's it. Thanks so much for thinking about it.
well, thank you. Anyone else like to speak tonight? Since there's so many here about trails, I think we ought to move the agenda item up. Does council agree with that?
That'd be great.
We have on the agenda further down, consideration of motion affirming the city of University Heights is committed to building trails as described at the June council meeting presentation of Think Iowa City. And it's on the agenda tonight because Tim Schroeder is on the executive board of Think Iowa City representing University Heights. And he got a message from Josh Schomburger saying, where's the council at on this plan right now? Are you ready to move this forward and do grant money or what? Or do you need more time, more public input? What? Does that pretty much cover it, Tim, or?
Yeah, they wanted some go ahead so they could start the fundraising process. I think as we got into it more, they need to know a schedule, they need to know how much the money the city's willing to commit, they need to know some additional details, which we need to work on before we can give them the official go ahead. But I think the point is not to say we're gonna table it. We're still moving ahead, we're figuring out the details, but so that's what this is.
Right, thank you, Tim. Yeah. And so, Nick, you've been talking to Nick Pfeiffer and Josh Schomburger too about it, and maybe you'd like to make a suggestion to council.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone showing up and talking about it. I really was soliciting feedback from the community, positive or negative. Because this isn't, we've had some controversial projects in the past. I think everybody's aware of that. And so the hope is that we would do this differently so that there's more of a consensus going forward. We can't always please 100%. But it seems like, this was something discussed at the last election, city council election, using that land, something that seems like it just has a ton of support. I agree with what everyone said tonight about the details too. There's a lot of expense that goes into, making it accessible, but there's also a lot of grants that can go toward, paying for that. There's concerns about parking, but I'm not hearing anybody saying, you know, I would feel uncomfortable moving forward with the idea that we at least support moving forward with it, if that makes sense. So I think the hope would be that council would give the feedback that Tim's looking for, that he's communicated. Understanding that it's not saying we're gonna build it a certain way. The document that was circulated was kind of the best initial draft, and even since then, the engineer has been working on if we were gonna split it up into different phases, how would we do that? And so they have provided, just, less than I think an hour ago, I don't,
About an hour ago.
a draft of, hey, if you're gonna split it up into phases, this is one way you could do it. The downside to splitting it up into phases is there is a lot of grant money that is, potentially able to cover, as Josh said at the last meeting, probably 80% of this project. But some of it is, the second 50% money, right? And then to get the second 50%, you have to come up with the first 50%, obviously. And so some of the grants can go to the first 50%. So the question is just, does it make sense to break it up, or does it make sense to kind of go all at once based on how the grant funding could work out? So I think what we're asking for tonight is just, the council's position on, are we interested in continuing to move forward? And my vote would obviously be yes. I don't want to push this. I don't want to rush it. I definitely appreciate OUP North. This is gonna be in their backyard if it goes as it is, generally roughed out right now. But I envision, putting flags out for a while, right? Before any concrete would be poured, or, really showing people where, a little bit more about the details. And I'm not necessarily an expert on all these things, so I'd be deferring to the experts to be able to help articulate the plans further. There just are a lot of little details, but I think it just seems like the community is ready to keep this moving, because it's probably gonna take a while either way, right? It's not gonna be this year. Hopefully it'd be getting going next year, but even that's not a guarantee. And if we don't keep it moving, I think that would be a concern. And also, if we are at all considering phases, I know that at least the REAP grant funding deadline is in August, is my understanding. So they'd want to start looking at, could we even apply for that this year? Or are we gonna be waiting all the way until next August to apply for that? So before I say anything, I guess more formally, I would like to hear if other council members have opinions, in terms of how we can move forward without being too presumptuous, with the limited time that this plan has been out circulating in the community.
Well, I can tell you, the Achilles heel for me, and I've even heard the concerns of folks here tonight, is parking. I mean, it's a wonderful idea, but I don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse, so I'd like to see a comprehensive plan of realistically where we're gonna park, or are we just gonna consider this a walk to only place to go for a walk? These days, anybody ever gonna want to park? I mean, handicapped folks are gonna need a van or something to offload a wheelchair or whatnot. Do we have that space available? No, I'm totally on board with it, but I gotta have some basics in place first, or we get, it sounds like funding is not an issue, use not an issue, but I don't wanna impact folks here that live next door to it. They got cars 3-point turning around in the yard all night long and things like that too. So, and no drainage of the 2 access points. So if you can come up with a great idea of where we're gonna park or have some parking, I mean, that's the only Achilles heel that I see with the whole project. You convince me of that, I'm on board.
Yeah, I think speaking to that, just briefly, in the plan, they have the, as I think Dr. Hobson has communicated, they don't anticipate that this will draw people necessarily to the area because we have so many good trails. This would be, as he explained, I think one pearl on the necklace, I think was the analogy. But right now, the draft does have a small accessible parking area northwest of OUP. And so that would be, the idea is that, again, it's an option, just like the concrete path. That's one of the more expensive parts in the PowerPoint slides, in terms of the the overall cost is making, you know, a little bit of parking down there for people to, you know, potentially unload, even if they maybe live local, they still may want to drive to the area, so. Yeah, I appreciate it. That was definitely something that was discussed and the idea that. It's great for us, you know, but it's probably not so amazing that people are gonna necessarily be driving. I mean, I guess we'll see, but that's.
I think the parking's very important for handicap parking, especially so they can go to
I mean, if you're gonna have
the,
concrete and.
yeah, right.
And
Especially for that. I think we were kind of concentrating on that and making it more of a walk-to type park. You know, unless you know somebody in the neighborhood and you park in their driveway.
I just wanna
but-
be sure, but.
But I know, but that's how way
Walking
I
distance,
see it,
that's great.
like that, a little more like that. But the other thing that we are gonna have an open house, or council's working on towards an open house for, the Melrose project in August, hopefully, but it could be, they want to do it sooner than later. It could be sometime in August. And I got some dates by the design engineer and by Ryan Foley of like August 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th, or August 13th, 14th, or 15th, or maybe the week after that. And an open house where they'd have displays of the project. They'd have different ideas of design, like signs or maybe streetlights and things like that at this, so that people could walk around, talk to the engineers and that. And so Nick and I were talking about using this time also as having the Trails project displayed too, that same night, so you could come and look at. And then you wouldn't have a set time or a set meeting. It'd be you come between certain hours that you could make it, and it would be, you know, that's hopefully a lot of people, we've had success with this in the past when we've done a street project. And especially the people who need to get you know, we need city easements on things, and those people really want to see the project too, but everybody wants to see the project, but that way we get good input on this Trails project too. And so I haven't given the dates out to the council. I'm just saying right now, that's something we can do. When we get federal grant money like we did for Melrose Avenue, we need to have public input for it. And so you can actually see the design and you can look at it and you can see where the city garden's gonna be, how the street's gonna be straight and how it's gonna look to everybody. And a lot of people here live close to Melrose or around Melrose, and so that's important to show everybody that. So that's what we're talking about now, is maybe doing that. And did you have some comments, Lisa, about the Trails project? We talked a little bit about the
Well, you
project.
had forwarded me an email that had some questions. And if we've resolved those questions, I'm in favor of the trails, of course, but I want the city to be assured that we're taking the right steps at the right time.
Uh-huh. Right. And we are undergoing this Melrose Complete Streets project. The planning has been 2 years. And now we're moving forward to starting in the spring of 2026, and you'll hear more about that. And it'll continue into 2027, because you gotta make sure to keep the street open, and it's just more difficult to do in just 1 year. And of course, we have to think of football. And so that's all important to everyone. So I'm just saying that, you know, it's a $3.34 million project, and we're getting about 1.4 from federal funding. And so we're bonding, the city is bonding for the streets project here. And so we're trying to negotiate that. And then also, you know, we don't know about the grant funding for the Swisher track, but we have experts working on it with this team from Think Iowa City. They're going to be submitting the grants for the city, and it's wonderful. So that's what council has to proceed through, is some of that. You know, we have this expense ahead and we're gonna be bonding. We can't bond for, parks and trails, because that's not essential to the city. And we'd have to vote for that, but we're thinking we can maybe even do some fundraising, some grants, some, you know, we can do some things that hopefully they can get up to 80%. Do you think they can? You know, that's what they told us. And so, you know, that's why the city is being cautious here, and it just was presented in June, even though Nick and Tim have been working on this for months and months. It just, and then the deadline is right here, so I think we should try and proceed with it at the best we can and get information about how we can. I think that's the consensus of the council. They want to keep this moving. I've heard from you, Lisa, and I've heard from you, Steph. You want to keep this moving, and you said that, Doug, and I know. So I was thinking that maybe we could have two members of the council and maybe like our city administrator and maybe some other staff member. I'm gonna be on vacation, but you know, kind of come up with some recommendations to council, you know, work together in a team. And it's just that three council can't work together at one time because it's a majority. So that's why it's two. And, you know, and when I can, I'd be glad to help too, but to kind of keep this moving and keep talking with Think Iowa City, and you're on the executive board, so that's wonderful, Tim, and I know you can represent us there, and Nick's been working with the team all along for this project. He's been volunteering to do all of that work. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think I would like to, and if it'd be I guess an oral motion or whatever it would be, but I would like to give Tim authority to communicate back to his board that we have the sufficient support so that they can put in their budget money to devote toward the grant application process or investigating what grants might get put together for this.
Yeah, that's,
And the same time, we haven't talked about this, but and Steve, sorry to put you on the spot, but I would like to be able to give Steve authorization to communicate with the university, just so we don't ever go out of sequence in terms of making sure we're locking down our rights if we're investing on university property. At the same time, we're getting the money to invest on, you know, in part on university property. So I don't know, Steve, if that's a fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just need to coordinate it. You know, we don't want to be pledging something we don't have authority
well,
to.
you met with David Keft.
Yeah,
With,
that-
yeah,
he's on vacation this week. He's gonna be reaching out to Steve next week to start those discussions. It's similar easement to what they have. They have similar agreements with the city of Oroville with trails that are part of the city of Oroville that go through university land. So it's a easement use agreement, since it's pretty boilerplate, so.
that's good
It's
news.
good.
And that's gonna happen in September, I guess,
And they,
right?
yeah, they were hoping to take it to the Board of Regents in September. That was another reason we didn't wanna look like we were stalling the project in any way. We wanna keep the momentum going forward, just so we don't give them the wrong signal.
So Steve, what would be your suggestion in terms of what we need in a motion to communicate both the support to Think Iowa City and the University of Iowa Board of Regents, and to give you the, you know, sufficient support in terms
Put
of
you on the
spending
spot.
time communicating with University of Iowa?
I don't think you need to do anything in particular with regard to me. I understand what we're doing, you know, in my role as city attorney, I can handle that part. I think sort of what we said in the agenda is, I think been sufficient, just that the council, I can't remember how we worded it, but you know, the council.
Committed to building trails as described at the June council meeting and the presentation by Think Iowa City.
So moved?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Nick, second by Lisa. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, you got all that?
I got it.
Thank you. And any. Hey, Sarah. So we're gonna keep on going here and go back to the city administrator report, and you're gonna give an update on accessory dwelling units.
Yes.
Well, everyone's welcome to stay, but if they wanna leave, that's fine too. But if we're not,
Can I also make sure, can I also make
We
sure
have
that
an
everybody
interesting-
got on the sign-in sheet? Cause that has to be part of the minutes, so there's a
Thank you.
sign-up sheet by the
And-
table, so, thank you.
it would be, yeah, so we'll give you a few minutes. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, great. Some people are gonna stay. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, he's getting ready with. And for people who don't know, Troy Kelsey is our city administrator here that the council put in, so that's great. And he was our former police chief, that's why you might know him. Okay, we're ready, chief.
Not quite.
No, you're not chief
Gotta get
anymore,
it.
ready. Troy.
Need to get it down to presentation mode. Why is it gonna show me presentation mode? Come on. It's thinking, Troy. It'll get there. Did I mention we need a new computer for the council?
Now it's you.
Is that an ADU?
Okay. Very good. I did submit a written report. Most of it speaks for itself. I would like to spend a few minutes going over accessory dwelling units. I know there was some interest on council. This is a new law now, that was passed by the legislative body and then signed into law by Governor Reynolds in May of this year, and it came into effect July 1. I went to a legislative update and training. The presenters were the AARP on this particular bill or this particular law. AARP was instrumental in both drafting and seeing that this was presented and then lobbying for its passage. They see this as a positive step towards more easily allowing multi-generational living. It's actually a fairly simple bill as laws go. It's 6 pages long. The first 3 pages are identical to the second 3 pages, with the exception that the first 3 pages apply to county regulations and the second 3 pages apply to city regulations. Other than that, the language is identical. If you go ahead and switch, Mike. The legal definition drawn straight from the bill is what is an accessory dwelling unit? It's, and it's important, this language is key. An accessory dwelling unit means an additional residential dwelling unit located on the same lot as a single-family residence that is either attached to or detached from the single-family residence. Some key phrases there is it's an additional unit and it's attached to a single-family residence, so it can't be, for example, the condominiums, OUP North could not have ADUs because they're not single-family residences. But it can be either detached or attached. So somebody could, if zoning ordinance allowed it, somebody could build a standalone structure in the backyard, or they could convert a detached garage to an accessory dwelling unit, or they could make an attic space, a dormer or a basement. But there are certain criteria that need to be met. Go ahead, Mike. Single-family residence defined by code is a structure maintained and used as a single dwelling unit. A single-family residence cannot share with another dwelling unit heating facilities, hot water equipment, or any other essential facilities. And for the sake of a bathroom, that would be a toilet and a tub or shower, and a kitchen, that would be a stove, sink, and says what their stove, sink, and refrigerator. So those items cannot be shared. If you have a dwelling unit attached to or associated with another residence, and any of those things are shared, then it's not a single family residence. So this law only applies to single family residences, So if you commingle, then you couldn't call that an accessory dwelling unit because you no longer are adding it on. There's no longer this additional living space, the single family residences. One little exception to note, many building codes, and I think ours does too, like currently, if you were talking about rental facilities, it's typical that the rental facility the rental unit has a different utility meter, for example, than the primary residence. This particular code section allows you to have shared metered services as long as there's a separate or shared line of service, as long as there's a separate meter for both sides. Go ahead, Mike. Okay. The code's pretty specific, very specific. These are drawn right from it. The city shall allow a minimum of 1 ADU on the same lot as a single family residence in accordance with the following conditions. So we don't get to pick and choose as long as it meets these conditions. And while these conditions are simple, they're also actually, most of our ordinances, our building code ordinances already do apply. An ADU shall comply with all building regulations. So those are regulations that would apply to the single family residence. You cannot make separate regulations for the ADU. If there's a height restriction on a residence for a home, then that height restriction applies to the ADU. If there's a maximum lot coverage or a minimum frontage or architectural requirement, anything that applies to the single family residence applies to the ADU. But you cannot make something specific to the ADU. It has to be treated the same, if that makes any sense. An ADU shall not exceed 1,000 square feet or 50% of the size of the single family residence, whichever is larger. Again, fairly self-explanatory. You can't build basically a second home on a lot. Now, none of our lots would allow it, but if I was out in the county, I couldn't build a home just like my home and call it an ADU. It can only be half as large or 1,000 square feet, whichever is larger. An ADU may be prohibited or limited by applicable historical building codes. I'm not sure we have any that apply. Some communities like Iowa City does, but if you have state recognized historical buildings or historical district and you have codes specific to that district, those would also apply to an ADU. So if there were prohibitions for basically development or of those areas, they would apply to an ADU. And an ADU must be real property on a permanent foundation and it must be assessed for real estate taxes. What you can't do is pull in your Airstream and park it behind your lot or on your foundation or whatever the case may be and say, that's my ADU. It has to be, you can, by code, you could bring something like that in. You could bring a manufactured home in or by code, you could bring in, if building code allowed it, you could bring in a mobile home, for example, but you would have to convert it to real property. It would have to be made permanent. Now, we have ordinances, we have building ordinances that prohibit pulling in a mobile home, strapping it down to a foundation. Those would still apply because they apply as a single family residence. They aren't specific to an ADU. So again, whatever your building code states towards single family residences, but the law does allow, if somebody asks or you hear about it going on in another community, if it's not prohibited by building code, as long as you convert that temporary or mobile structure to a permanent real property, it's assessed as real estate, then the code says that's allowed. It will not apply to us. Go ahead, Mike. Pretty specific, a very list of things that the city shall not impose any of the following limits or restrictions. There can't be any limits or restrictions specific to the ADU on placement or appearance that are more restrictive than those imposed on a single family residence. Again, if we have building codes that apply to the house, they apply to the ADU, but we can't say, oh, if you're going to build an ADU or you're going to convert it, here's this separate set of restrictions that apply. We cannot do that. You cannot require an ADU to match the exterior design, roof pitch, or finishing materials of the single family residence. If the criteria, if the ADU meets the criteria to be an ADU and it meets those 4 steps or 4 things that we talked about previously, and somebody puts a standalone structure in their backyard that meets code by minimum frontage, size, all of that, you can't dictate, the city can't dictate to say it has to look a certain way, it has to look like the house that it's going next to. You can't do that. Whatever applies to the ADU has to apply to the home also. Regulations on the use of an ADU as a rental property that are more restrictive than the uniform residential landlord and tenant law. Again, while the AARP envisions this as multi-generational living, you can't restrict and say, well, it can't be rental property. If the property, if the single family residence and property meets the criteria for the addition of an ADU, and an ADU is put on, whether it's standalone or conversion of a basement or a living space, you can't regulate it differently than you would a rental property, nor can you say it can't be used as a rental property. And then finally, a requirement that the lot containing an ADU must have additional parking beyond that required for the single family residence. It does not matter that they're adding living space and potentially the number of people that are living there. You can't then say, well, you need additional parking, like we do on some of the rental properties. You need property to match your occupancy. You can't require an ADU to have additional parking, nor can you require the single family residence to have additional property or parking to accommodate whatever additional living space or number of persons occupants to the property are. Nor can you charge a fee that says, you know what, we need to charge a fee because there's going to be extra parking on the streets or whatever the case may be. Again, you can't treat it any differently than a single family residence. Now, if there are costs that are associated with, for instance, our sidewalk project, those can be assessed to the ADU just the same as they would. I mean, they're not exempt. They're treated exactly like the single family residence. Go ahead, Mike. Continuing what the city shall not do. The city can't restrict occupancy of the single family residence or the associated ADU in any of the following manners. You can't require the property owner to be a resident of one of the units. You can't require a familial or a marital or an employment relationship to exist between the people living in the occupants of the residential, of the single family residence in the ADU. There's no restrictions on what it can be. And again, AARP envisions this as familial or multi-generational living, but there are no restrictions on how it can actually be used as far as that relationship. And finally, you can't restrict the occupancy ADU based on income or age. You can't say, but we only want active senior living, or we only want people. I mean, you can't do that. Again, it makes sense to me, but those are some of the things that have been tried in the past that this bill specifically prohibits. Go ahead, Mike. And then the last of the shall not, again, we touched on this. The city cannot require that separate utility lines be put in unless, for whatever reason, there can't be a metering of that one line that's going in to separate out, for billing purposes, utilities to each of the units. If that can't be done, then the city can require a second line so that for billing purposes, they're standalone because they need to be standalone. You can't impose different city impact fee structure or standard for the ADU than those used for single family residents on the same lot. Again, think building fees, building permits, things like that. They have to be the same as they would for the single family resident. You can't require improvements or repairs to public streets or sidewalks beyond those that are already imposed or will be imposed on the single family residents on the same lot. Again, sidewalk repair, you could assess those along with the single family residents. You could assess those to the ADU, I mean, to that property, but you can't say the ADU is generating more traffic here, so therefore we're somehow saying this is the ADU's responsibility and not the homeowners. You can't do that. You can't break them out. Go ahead, Mike. Now we get into what the city shall do, and it's specific again language. The city shall do the following. The city shall approve an ADU permit application that meets the requirements set forth in state law without discretionary review or hearing and consistent with the time frame assigned to a single family residence. You can't drag your feet on it. You can't put them through, make them jump through special hoops. There's an application, they submit the application, and the application is either accepted because all the boxes are checked, or it's denied. And if the city denies an ADU permit, the reason for denial shall be provided in writing to the applicant and also include any remedy necessary to secure approval. So again, the idea is to make this as easy as possible for those desiring to get an ADU. It has to meet certain standards, but if it meets those standards, the city can't delay it, the city can't charge extra fees, the city has to make it happen and help make it happen if there's a remedy to be found. Mike. So very quickly in summary, the city cannot be more restrictive than the state. The city is allowed to be more permissive. If for whatever reason we wanted to say, you know what, we're going to waive certain building codes, set aside setbacks, whatever, we can do that. We're not required to do that. If the county wants to say, you know what, you can put up 3 ADUs instead of 1 ADU, the county can do that. But the city cannot be more restrictive than the state. An ADU must have its own entrance, utilities, furnace, water heater, sleeping quarters, bathroom, and kitchen, separate from the single family residency. So I have the basement that I want to convert into an ADU, and I want to call it an ADU instead of just living space. And I want the ability to either host house family or even rent it out. I have to make a separate entrance for that basement, and I have to separate out water, heat, kitchen, and all those things that are there. If it's not separated out, it's not an ADU. An ADU application must meet 4 basic conditions to be approved, and if it meets those conditions, it has to be approved. Comply with all applicable building regulations for a single family residence. We're fairly restricted. We have those listed. We're good about that. I think that because of that, you're not going to see ADUs popping up all over the place. An ADU shall not exceed 1,000 square feet or 50% of the single family residence. An ADU must meet any applicable historical building code restrictions. Doesn't apply to us. An ADU cannot be a mobile or temporary structure. It must be real property on a permanent foundation and assessed for real estate purposes. So again, if there was something that was prefab and moved in and somehow met our code, as long as it was made that permanent property and not a temporary structure, we would have to allow it if it met code across the board. So in general, an ADU should be treated exactly the same as a single family residence. Now, my honest assessment of this is I think it will have a minimal impact on the University Heights landscape. The law is only applicable to single family residents, and I believe that our lot sizes and our existing building codes will preclude the construction of detached ADUs on most properties within the city. Further, I don't think that many owners are going to choose to convert living space that they currently have into a separate ADU. There might be some properties that do this in order to have a second dwelling, if you will, that they could rent because they're able to do that. But it means carving that space away from the current living space in the house. What I do think that you might see is properties like Lisa's property that has a detached garage that's of decent size. Some of those, if the property owner chose to, could be converted to an ADU. They already meet code. They're already there as far as building codes. They're already there. They already exist. They already meet code. What would need to be done then is heating, separate entrance would already apply, a kitchen, sleeping space, and a bathroom. So that's where I see, in my opinion, that's where I see some places in University Heights choosing to say, you know what, we already have this existing structure. Now we're going to convert it, instead of to be an artist studio, we're going to call it an ADU, and we're going to make it an ADU. So that's where I see the impact to University Heights. But even then, there's not a lot of properties that I think will do that, because you are giving up your garage, you are giving up parking space, but in my opinion, those are the type of ADUs that you will see, applications for in the city of University Heights. The only other thing that I wanted to point out is, again, six-page law, 3 applies to county, 3 applies to cities. There is no application to HOAs. There's a part of the code section that says what HOAs can regulate. And this law specifically does not amend that section. And I'm told that that was intentional, while the AARP would have liked to have seen that. It was pushed back from certain legislators, and in the end, that didn't happen. So HOAs, for example, Burkdale Court, if their covenant, or if they had a covenant or brought in a covenant that said, we don't allow ADUs, doesn't matter that they're in the city of University Heights, the HOA can regulate and prohibit ADU. Or they can make their own restrictions to ADU. They could say, you know what, we're going to allow you petitioned us or asked us to allow this so that you can house your elderly parents. We're going to allow that, but we're not going to allow it to be a rental property. That came up at the training where a realtor was there, said, somebody needs to basically tell the ADU that, or the HOA, that under this new law, they can't do that anymore. I've got a client who has a mother-in-law's apartment and they want to sell that house now. And the AARP representative said the HOA is fully within its rights to say, no, they can't do that. Well, then the property's worthless. They said, no, it's not worthless. It was a value for whoever built that, and it will be a value to somebody else. But just because they built an ADU and had permission for it, doesn't then give them permission in an HOA to treat it as a rental property. The HOA can still have more restrictive covenants. Next one. Finally, disclaimer. Again, I think it's a fairly simple, as laws go, a fairly simple law. I think I've been pretty thorough in my examination, and I attended the legislative update training. But all of this is my understanding of the law. I did send this PowerPoint presentation to Attorney Ballard for review, but this is my understanding of it. And if there's something wrong that's in there, or later there's an interpretation that's different and somebody says, well, that's city administrator, where do you, again, this is my understanding of it. So again, I talked with Steve and I'm comfortable with it. I think that it's fairly accurate, but it's still my understanding of it. Any questions that I can answer for anybody? Yes, sir.
What does the state constitute as a permanent foundation? Does that mean concrete, or could that be other things like railroad ties or rock?
I don't know. I'm
Because
sure.
there's an example, down in Washington County, I built a camp, portable camp, I call it portable, it's on skids. I put a cement pad there, thinking I could get around that. Nope, I'm being charged real estate on it because it's on a permanent foundation. Even though it's on skids, and I can move that house all over where I want.
I don't know what our ordinance says.
This doesn't define it. I would have to defer to Terry Gerd on if there's a building code. You know, I mean, there are homes in University
Right.
Heights that are built on wood foundations, so it can't be a definition of concrete. I think it's gonna have to be anchored. I mean, the easy one is if there's and I don't know how to answer Washington County. But if there's
Nobody does.
if there's a mobile home that has wheels, and most mobile homes
Oh, yeah.
did have wheels at some point, but they haven't moved for years.
They
But
get
if
to
it's-
take them off and cut the tongues off back in the
Exactly.
day.
Yeah, so I mean, that's an easy one. Well, that's not permanently affixed. I think it's gonna have to be anchored to something to,
See, mine's not, just.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to go talk to Washington.
In Johnson County, with my shed, I could not put it on concrete, but I could sink posts and put it on there, and I couldn't run electricity to it. If I ran electricity to it, they considered it a permanent foundation or a permanent structure. So there were certain criteria that I had to. So I don't know if it varies county by county. I don't know if there's a definition in the code. I don't know the answer to that.
I'll take a look while we're reading here, if I can find something in the state code, but I don't know if there'll be anything.
Again, I think it'll have very little impact. I do think you'll see requests for this. I do think you'll see applications come through, and it's a fairly simple process. It either meets code or it does not. It either meets the very few criteria that they put in or it does not. And I think our building ordinances will make it fairly easy for Terry to decide whether it meets or not. Anything else?
Anything else? Steve, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I would add is, first of all, I think Troy did a great job with this PowerPoint. Did everything that needed hit, I think. I've contacted the Iowa League of Cities a couple of times just to ask if they have any, sometimes they'll put out guidance, you know, when there's a change in the law. They want to kind of let the whole, you know, all the members know, hey, this has changed, here's some things to think about, or at least spec out what the changes are, which Troy's done that already, but I contacted them again today and I didn't hear back. When I contacted them, when this was initially signed, but even before it took effect, the answer I got was that they were working on something. That was a couple months ago, so if I get anything back, I'll send it to Troy, and we can shop it around. I don't know that it would be anything much, I don't think it'd be anything different from what Troy's presented, but if there's something more additional or things that people are looking at, might be helpful for the council to know that. That's
Thank
all.
you. Thanks, Troy. Do you have anything else you want, unless there's questions about other? He's attended quite a few meetings for me. I appreciate it. And
I do not.
yeah, it's, so we'll go on to city clerk report.
The only thing I want to mention, just because there's a few people from the public here yet, we will have a municipal election in November. Candidate nomination papers will be available from the county beginning August 11th. We meet August 12th, so I'll mention all that again, but that's coming up, and all 5 council seats in the mayor will also be up for election, so. The 2 things I have are the renewal. We're at the end of liquor license season. This is the last of our renewals until next April. But the Marriott Bistro and then separately the Heights Rooftop are both up for their Class C liquor license renewal. They have completed all of the steps through the Alcoholic Beverages Division online. Chief Akers has run the background report. Inspector Gert has done the structure and fire and health inspections. So city staff would recommend approval of both of those liquor license.
So we have consider renewal Class C liquor license first for the Marriott Bistro. Is there a motion by Steph? Is there a second? Second by Doug. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Motion carries 5-0. And then we have consideration of renewal of Class C liquor license for the Marriott Heights Rooftop. Is there a motion? Motion by Steph. Is there a second? Second by Doug. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Great, and I'm gonna move that right past that on the agenda because I misspelled liquor. I realized on the agenda, sorry about that. Not my day.
It's like, what is that?
What was I drinking when I made?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Mike. Okay, any questions for Mike? We'll go on to the city treasurer report, and first John circulated the warrants.
Yes, I did, and I've got 2
And you have
additions.
2 extra.
I do. I had it pulled out here. One is from the city of Iowa City. $540 for a safety action plan. And the other one is CenturyLink
Safety action.
for $138.99.
What's the safety action? I just wondered.
MBOJC stuff.
Okay. Yeah, Troy's looking it over for a minute here. So those are the additions to what
Yeah,
you,
it came with this afternoon's mail.
okay. I just don't know what that is.
You know, yeah, I guess that's. I believe it's really anything. Okay, that's the main, that's the piece. Yeah. That's for the mobile service of police cars, separately.
Okay. Okay, just wanted to get clarification. Okay, is there any other additions to the warrants? Is there any objection to pay in the warrants? Hearing none, the warrants will be paid as stated by John Brown by unanimous consent. And then any questions for John? And continuing with that, and under finance, we have, and John sent around an email, a consideration of motion to reinvest a CD in the appropriate approximate amount of $112,000 in a new CD to be selected by the council upon the treasurer's report. And John, you circulated that.
I did, that was sitting at Hills Bank, it was gonna auto renew with a rate of 43%, we didn't do nothing, so. I told our banker at Hills to kill it. Allow us to get time to do some research, some rates to put it for the council, with hopes we get something better than 0.3%. In that account, there's actually 115,000.
Oh, yeah.
112.
Instead of
positive.
112, it's 115.
And we are also sitting with 25 grand and Green State savings, so the council actually has 140 grand to put for CDs, so if they wanna do like, and if they wanna stagger it, say like 70,000 in a 6 month, and 70,000 for 12 months, or something like that, you know, we could do that, but I won't let them know we actually have 140 grand.
Oh, okay. So what would council like to do? Well, we have 6 months, you might repeat it. Did you, is
Yeah.
4.20, I believe,
It is 4.20 6 months
6 months and
and 12 months, 4.15.
and then 18 months was 4.05.
4.05. I mean, I serve on the boards of some charities and what have you. We tend to like staggering and, you know, you read stuff, and it's like, yeah, there might be a nominal dip in interest rates the latter part of the year. But then that's why I always say that I always say don't ever put your money in one, like a one account. That's why I suggested earlier. Maybe you put like, you know, 70 in the 6 month and maybe 70 in the 12. Or you just put a whole 140,000 in 12.
Okay,
6 and 12 sounds fine to me. Stagger it.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised that Green State came out as the highest. I was like shocked. Because
Yeah.
that's not normally.
I know,
That's not
in
normally
the
the
fours,
case.
in the fours,
Yeah, that's not normally the case.
yeah,
So,
so. You made you wanna make the motion?
Go with your first option, sounds like, the stagger, half in the 6 month, half in the 12 month.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
moved.
which means in 6 months, we'll be talking about what to do with the 70+ grand.
Yeah.
That's,
and second by Lisa. Okay, any discussion? Okay, this is a simple motion, correct? Yeah, all in favor, say aye. Is anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Mayor,
Thanks for bringing that forward. Yes,
the
Troy.
safety action plan being in for JC, it looks like it's about $60,000 and that would be our cost to share for. So it's.
Oh, I remember that now. Okay, I didn't know that was the title. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Nick, did you have anything else? What I wanted to do there is talk a little bit again about those dates, if we want to give some dates for having a open house. And, you know, the dates that the engineers said were August 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th, or August 13, 14, 15. Now, that way, Ryan and Blake, the two engineers, could be here as early as 5 o'clock, probably as late as 8 o'clock. So you have, and then, you have to decide if you wanted. And then we'd also need someone to coordinate the trails plan. And for the same night. So it's something council could come in and out of. They don't really need to attend, if you can, I mean, but it would be nice. So I'm just saying if I don't know if those are good dates for people, but
August fifth center scheduled on August 4th already.
You have
This
something.
Building's on the schedule. I think sometimes it's nice to stick with the Tuesdays because we
oh,
do
yeah.
things on Tuesdays, so that would be
Yes.
August 5th would work for me.
Oh, yeah, because that'd be the 5th.
Yeah.
What does council think of that date? What do you think, Lisa? You were talking about.
We had talked about a later date, but I mean, a little bit later in August.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying maybe the 13th, 14th or 15th. Well, the 15th, I think, is a Friday. That's out. You want to have it on a Friday night.
Why not? It'll be exciting.
And then, so, I don't know,
So I mean,
both those
if
dates were,
I'm not here.
I don't know, but it would be nice to coordinate something with them so they can get their, displays set up. And then, I don't know, like, maybe Tim, you could see if you can get someone to come that night for the proposed plan. I mean, and then we kind of have to decide on a time frame. I think we've always done about a 2 hour, but but I don't know. Maybe you want a 3 hour, I don't know, 5 to 8, 6, 5:30, 7, I don't know, 5:38, I don't know. But
What about 6 to 8? People can,
I think that covers.
kind of
enough.
covers, yeah, if you want to be early, be late, so they could get to part of it.
Yeah, I thought 5 was a little early and maybe nobody would come around there. 6 to 8, what do you think of 6 to 8? Sure. Well. Let's see if we can coordinate that. And spread that word. I don't know, that's gonna be. I know Lisa does a good job putting it on the website. I just don't know how people see that.
They
Unless we,
subscribe to notify me and they get a feed.
yeah. I mean, it'd be nice if we could flyer the city. That's tricky, but it'd be nice.
Well, we've had somebody that
But
you could combine the thing they wanted.
what
to
I do
play.
is I kind of put the word out that I can to people too, especially people really interested, and I don't know if you have ideas on that. I just wanted to get a date, so we're gonna say the week before the council meeting, August 5th.
Fifth.
Tuesday, August 5th, from 6 to 8 in the city office, and we'll see if you can coordinate that night. Because that's kind of important to have somebody for that.
The maps.
Yeah, they have, and they have, maybe we could even use the screen for some of that too. So they didn't have to make big map, we could use the projector. Are you gonna be in town then? Okay, that would be good, okay. Okay, we'll put that. And then, okay, so we'll go down to community protection, and the chief is here tonight. Thank you.
One thing I.
You can't hide back there, you're too tall.
No, not relevant. One thing I will mention is, I believe it's August fifth is National Night Out.
Oh,
Uh-oh,
Correct me if I'm incorrect, I said.
God, well, that's out.
My phone is in.
Well, then it's gonna be out here.
Yeah.
Right, between what time and what time?
Well, it's open for discussion.
Oh, well, maybe we ought to
Just
have it
one-
before, yeah, and then
yeah,
say,
you like,
yeah,
drop
let's
it.
say 4 to 6 and 6 to 8. How about that?
That's,
How do you like that? 4 to 8?
Yeah.
For National Night Out?
Yeah.
Or 5 to 6, or, you know, we have a nice.
Before dinner.
yes, dessert is always.
Well,
first.
I think so.
Dessert is.
I
always
think that's important. We have ice cream before dinner.
Absolutely.
Hey, and then they can, well, yeah. Well, that might be a good thing.
Absolutely.
You think, council?
I think doing them both the same nights and I definitely a good idea.
Yeah.
So which would be which
Oh
times?
my, well,
The young people, I would think.
do you want like
people
4:30 to
start.
6, or you want to start at 4:30 or 4 or what? I don't know. Is 4 too soon? I don't know. Is 6, I don't know.
You can have most parents bringing this fall, the children up, so it will-
Yeah.
4 o'clock may be a push on some work on people's work, but. That's my own thought.
So
Time at once.
you suggest something to all of us.
Well, then
It's usually 2 hours.
Okay, so. Now, did you have anything to add?
All I'll add is that we're working on a more permanent solution to our crossing guard that we lost. Looking into some signage, flashing pedestrian signs, and we're still looking into that right now. So,
So you'll give a report in August?
Sure.
More? Okay, very good.
Have
Any
you talked to
questions?
Clint Ralston
yes,
about it?
yes.
And then we'll go to streets and sidewalks, and Ryan's in. And sent a report around, and with that, you know, he talked about in June about having a sidewalk program that we need a resolution for. And well, I guess they came up with it, didn't they? Consideration of resolution 2525 requiring property owners to repair sidewalks abutting their property, and then he'll send around a letter. And residents have the sidewalks marked, and some of them had called and asked about that. And that's what this does, and Ryan explains it well in his report. So could I have a motion on the table for resolution 2525?
I think.
Okay, motion by Doug. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Steph. Okay, discussion.
Which was it?
Any discussion? Okay, resolution, roll call vote.
Herbold.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Swales.
I,
Gone.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
And then he also talked about consideration of resolution 2526, setting an administrative fee for sidewalk repair projects. And in that, and Ryan talked to me about this, and what he said was, he spoke with Josiah about it to get the history. Josiah, our previous city engineer for like 15 years, and he said, you know, when we did that project, it was $100 fee. And so Josiah said, if you want to cover the expenses, it should be $200. Because that's how much the fees have gone up for an engineer in that time. But Ryan said, I want to suggest to council half price and keep it at $100 rather than 200. So, so he has it in this resolution as $100. Is that how you understood it too, what Ryan?
Yes, but I also understood that we could vote against this resolution.
Well, sure.
I mean.
Oh, absolutely.
yes.
Yeah.
Can we just amend it to waive the $100 fee if we wanted to? Just leave the rest of it, or is that what the resolutions?
I think you just voted down.
Well, the,
Cause is it just about?
I'm not a lawyer. What am I arguing with a lawyer for? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you probably just voted down the way that the resolutions 25 and 25, 26 sort of dovetail. And they don't, and it's not much of an overlap, but a little bit is the notice that will go out from Ryan's office. So if there's not going to be.
Yeah, it's not to exceed it.
Yeah, if there's not gonna be, this is the council's, the idea would be to put in that notice, hey, if you join our program, we're gonna pass on an administrative fee. It's not gonna exceed $100, could be more than that. If you want to, if you don't wanna have that part, that's fine, but the other message was going to be, if you don't join the city program and then we come out and you don't do your repair, or we come out and inspect your repair and it's not adequate, you're gonna pay an administrative fee, and it's gonna be more than, we think it'll be more than the $100 that people are gonna pay if they join that. So I think if you don't want to impose $100 administrative fee max, because the resolution also says that the council can decrease that if it wants, but if you don't want to put any notice, any information in this notice about, if you join our program, we're thinking we're gonna assess $100, then that's fine, just vote against 26, or don't move to adopt it, whatever you wanna do. But then tell Ryan, hey, by the way, we didn't do that. So when you send that notice, you do need to tell the people, if you don't do this work, or if you do it not up to code, you're gonna pay an administrative fee. So I think that would be the council's intent.
Yeah, and
Right. But we're not gonna pass any of that on to people that join the program.
and that would encourage people to join the program. I would think.
Well, what if if you look at page 2. What if we turn number 1 to 0?
Yeah,
That would make number 2 inapplicable. And number 3 inapplicable, I think, but number 4 would still, you could still put the fee there.
yeah,
If they don't do their own work by the deadline and they don't opt into the city program, I'd almost rather put the fee there. You know what I'm saying? People who cooperate and do what they're supposed to do efficiently, get it fixed themselves or take part in our program, don't pay the fee, but if you don't, that seems, I would add the fee to number 4, I think.
yeah, and I think that,
5 would be 0. So it's,
yeah, I mean, I think you can do it that way. I think if you made number 1 0, the only, again, I go back to saying, I mean, I don't think it makes, well. Yeah, I don't know, if you would want the notice from the city engineer's office to say, hey, sidewalk repair program, we're gonna get a contractor to, do it on a cost basis. If you wanna join, you can. And by the way, we're not gonna put an administrative fee.
I would say administrative fee would be 0, the city council's, if we decide to do that, city
Right.
council is not charging the administrative fee, 0, if you do not complete
see
the
what you're saying.
repair work on time. Or opt into either the program or repair it on time yourself. There will be an administrative fee, I guess was the idea. Number 4.
Like number 4, who do not complete the required work, then you'd put that fee in there.
So, yeah, I think, Nick, what I would suggest doing on number 1 is just saying, property owners who elect to join the city's repair program shall not be assessed administrative
there you go.
expense in addition to the actual cost of repair based upon the contractor's invoice.
I would even say you could put that to 200. And not be, because that's what he said, they would cost $200 and they were.
He
halving
did.
it.
He did, and he's
He did.
recommending
And-
half.
He's recommending half, and I'm saying for people who comply, they will not be charged the $200 fee, but for people who don't comply in 4, they will be charged the administrative fee.
But I don't
Council
know.
can
That's
put
what, that's
whatever
what
they-
four says. It just doesn't say $200.
Exactly,
Right.
yeah.
I would guess it's gonna be a lot more than $200.
If, for the small group of people who don't comply.
Yeah, so I don't know that you wanna set that fee. I'm glad it be charged hourly or whatever, cause it's not set.
Four says that it would set, they could set the fee later.
That's right.
Yeah, so I don't think you wanna say what that number is.
Right.
Yeah.
So for the people that aren't joining the program, we're not gonna set a fee, right?
But there's, we can set the fee later.
You can set it
Is
later.
there a notice problem with that?
No.
No.
No, cause
Say,
that was,
didn't
that's,
comply, you're gonna get fined.
that's right.
Unknown amount.
It's part of the way of encouraging people to join the program. It's like,
Yeah,
I mean, the way it was written, hey, if you join the program, it's not gonna cost you any more than $100. Now it's gonna say, hey, if you join the program, it won't cost you anything. But under both of those scenarios, if you don't join the program, you don't do the work, you don't do it correctly, you're gonna be assessed an administrative fee. We don't know how much.
that would be
it's gonna
actual expense.
It'll be actual expense, will be
Like
determined
Tim
later.
says, probably more than $200.
So we're actually
Yeah.
editing this
Right.
and not
So
voting
number-
it down, but editing, as you just said, and as Nick's explained.
So
Right.
number one shall say shall not be assessed.
Right,
Two will be struck. Three will be struck. Four will become number two.
yeah, I think that's right.
And five would be struck.
I think the only amendment to that is number one, you said not be assessed, but I think we still should put the $200.
That's up above.
Yeah,
In
and
the
then
resolution,
gotcha.
sorry.
Yeah,
As long as we don't say the 100 there, cause that gets confusing. I think.
yeah.
Well,
You were cutting
it's
that
easy to
out.
understand if you put it there too, like Nick says. You
It
know,
also might set a little bit of expectations
Yeah.
too. What gets it a little higher, the actual expenses might not be like pennies, you know. Get it done.
Current rates. But that,
You were gonna strike out not to exceed $100 per property address, right? Or just add the word not,
Right,
Yeah.
shall not be assessed an administrative expense. Parentheses, in addition to the actual cost.
Actually, you don't need to list any number in there. You won't be, if you're not being
Yeah.
set an administrative assessed.
Okay,
On the number four, it says you will be assessed an administrative fee if you don't comply.
So does
That
the
should-
whereas that quotes the $200, is that confusing?
yeah, let's
for
look at
people?
that. Oh, there it is.
I mean, it just says this is what we think it's gonna be,
Approximately 200.
Right,
but then
I
it says.
think
later.
Tim's point is good though, if they are dividing up the actual cost, do we think it's gonna be close to 200, or I think, Tim, you were
That's-
suggesting it might
that's
be
what
higher than
they
200 at
thought
that
it-
point?
That's
And if
what
they've gotta go
Josiah
out there
told me.
multiple, they were saying for the people that, to do the inspection of the people that join the program, it's $200. Don't join the program, I gotta go out there, see that you didn't do it, and, or inspect it, or go back again and a couple times, I would guess that's.
Oh,
gonna
yeah,
add up.
you're right. We'll have to go back again.
I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, so I think what I think keeping the 200 the way it's written, that's saying if you join the program, we think it, it's gonna be about $200, and then later we say, but we're not gonna bill you any. That's what it says. So I don't think the $200, I think you're right, I think it will be way more than that if you don't join the program. So if number one says, property owners who elect to join the city's repair program shall not be assessed an administrative expense in addition to the actual cost of repair based upon the contractor's invoice for work performed.
Right.
Two had been four. Property owners who do not complete the required work or attempt the repairs but don't satisfy shall be assessed an administrative expense in an amount to be determined after the actual expenses are known. In addition to the actual cost of repair if the city is required to do the work.
Yeah.
And then I just modified three, which I'm not even sure we need to keep it in, but three, which had been five. So
Yeah.
I just say, all property owners who receive notice of required repair work shall be informed that they will be assessed administrative expense if they do not perform the work by the deadline or fail to meet city standards and perform it.
I think that's all great. The only other whereas that's a slight tweak is the second whereas says the council does not intend to pass all of.
Yeah, okay.
So I think we just need to delete all of, does not intend to pass the administrative expenses on to the property owners who join the city repair program.
Oh, yeah, you gotta change that one. About remove it.
Where is that?
It's on the page above.
The
Very
whereas.
last whereas,
Oh,
on
okay.
the first page, just take out the words all.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah.
Okay. So everybody knows what they're voting for now, correct? Okay, and Steve's got it all changed, correct?
Yeah.
So.
And
this
I
is-
have to say that I have pink paint on my side. I just have to say.
Steve, I don't think that's really a conflict though, because she's similarly situated to
Yeah,
everyone else that has a sidewalk in
Right.
the community, which is,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's, you know, admirable and forthcoming, just for Lisa to say that, but yeah, I don't think it's any conflict either.
so moved.
so it is consideration of resolution 2526 as amended
Yes.
by the council and the city attorney tonight.
It's everything.
And we did a motion on this one?
Herbal just made.
Herbal did, okay, Mick, and then who seconded? Okay, Doug, second by Doug. Lisa doesn't want to vote for that specific motion, okay, but she'll vote. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
No, it's a.
No, a resolution.
And as we,
Vote,
and as we rotate.
it's my first time.
The first one is more. Schroeder. Aye. Swales.
Aye.
Gone.
Aye.
Herbal.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Glad we got that fixed. So now building, zoning and sanitation, and
I think you're.
Tim, you've done a lot of work this month. And we're having a meeting
Board of Adjustment meeting July 21st.
July 21st at 7 PM. And you can also attend by Zoom, hopefully.
Yes. It's good.
And so anything else? No, we're good?
We're good.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
I'm good.
And then e-government, Lisa sent around a nice report. Hopefully you'll get a lot of people on Notify Me because you put it front and center.
Yes.
Any questions for Lisa? And then any announcements that council has? Okay.
We're gonna be gone the week of
Right.
July 20.
Oh, yeah, right,
July
right.
20 to 27.
That's right.
So,
And is there any objection to adjournment? Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned by unanimous consent.